Are we recording? District 4?
Present.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
Present.
District 5, Chair
Present.
Shedden. District 6? Present. District 7?
Present.
District 8?
Present.
District 9?
District 9 is present.
District 10? District 10? District 11? District 12?
Present.
District 13?
Present.
District 14?
Here.
And place 15. Thank you. You have quorum, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pacina. We do have quorum. Welcome, commissioners. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. It is 10:11 a.m. Welcome to the briefing of the Dallas City Plan Commission. Commissioners, as always, the briefing is a time for commissioners to ask questions of staff. We do have a couple of briefings. Folks here in the audience, any questions from you, please hold those until the hearing. Happy to hear from you. Commissioners, we're going to get started with the Historic Resources Survey. I think Mr. Miller is online. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the City Plan Commission. My name is Murray Miller, Director of the Office of Historic Preservation. The Historic Resource Survey of Downtown and Deep Ellum and thematic historic context statements represents the culmination of nearly 2 years of research, survey, analysis, and consultation on the part of our consultant, HHM and Associates. In June 2020, the City of Dallas commissioned HHM and Associates of Austin to undertake a historic resource survey of downtown Dallas and Deep Ellum. On May 2nd, 2022, the Landmark Commission recommended that the City Plan Commission and the City Council be informed about the Historic Resource Survey of Downtown and Deep Ellum for information. At this point, I would like to hand it over to Emily Payne, HHM Associates, who has been our lead consultant for a brief presentation. Emily?
Good morning. Let me share my screen for a brief presentation. Okay, did that work on your end? Are we all there?
It's coming up.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the project that we've been privileged to work on has been City of Dallas Historic Context Assessment and Survey of Downtown Dallas and Deep Ellum. So it's a two-part project. Part is citywide context assessment, and part is survey within the Deep Ellum and downtown. Okay, so our agenda, what we want to talk about today is introductions, project background, the context statement, the survey findings, the future planning and management, and then the Dallas Open History Hub. So introducing ourselves, we're working for the City of Dallas and Preservation of Dallas together to fund this project, and I personally am Emily Payne, and I was working throughout the project with my partner, Christina Cooper-Schmidt, who is on the ground in Dallas, managing the field work. Project background, the City of Dallas in boundaries were about 790 resources for the survey, again, citywide for the context, incorporating downtown and development. The schedule, we started up in 2020 with field work, public meetings, and then moved into a draft last November and submitted a final report in April, and that's what we're here to present today. So the historic context statement. As I mentioned, this is a citywide project. It was thematic in nature, so the structure of the organization goes theme by theme. It's highly illustrated, and it's intended to inform future evaluation and designations. So each theme is selected and narrated in terms of how it relates to historic buildings and how it can be used for evaluation and designation of future historic buildings. Okay, so this is just a snip of the table of context to show you the different themes. These themes were all selected with stakeholder involvement.
Ms. Payne,
About-
pardon me, Ms. Payne. I think some of us are having trouble hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if it's that your mic might be a little far or that your connection may not be strong enough, but it sounds slightly metallic.
Is this better?
I think it's about the same.
Okay, so I can try to do different audio. Do you want to stand by while I do that?
Let's try it.
Okay, I'll stop share and see if I can make that work. Hold on.
Can you guys hear me? Is that any better?
Yes, that's a little better. Thank you.
So sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know before I kept talking without being heard. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, do you need me to go back?
No, I think we're fine. We just keep moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as I was just saying, this is a snip of the different themes that were used for the historic context statements. They were selected with a great deal of public stakeholder involvement. There was a number of meetings and lists that went back and forth selecting the themes. And they're all discussed citywide, and they all use examples of things both that are still existing, that may be potential landmarks or historic districts, and things that are gone but representative of the trend. Okay, our survey findings. So again, our survey findings were focused in that area with 790 buildings in downtown and Deep Ellum. We found a number of new individual designations that we recommended, 24 National Register designations and 13 local. The reason that it's different is a number of buildings are listed just on the National Register currently, or just locally currently, and we recommend that to maximize their incentives, they have both designations. So as you can see, the individual recommendations are really distributed well across the survey area. Okay, in terms of historic district findings, we are recommending districts encompassing 326 resources, and all of those districts are about 80% contributing. So that means within those district boundaries that we're recommending, we have a really high degree of intact historic buildings. So the first table looks very complicated, and basically it's just showing that one of our biggest recommendations is that we take a number of very small and sometimes overlapping historic districts and consolidate them. There are a number of little historic districts scattered throughout downtown. Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes, as we said, they're listed just as the National Register or just as landmarks. And we're recommending that we consolidate those into a few bigger districts that will be administratively easier, and make sure that there are no buildings that are falling through the cracks in terms of incentives just because of kind of wonky boundaries. We're recommending expanding a number of historic districts in this part. So the West End Historic District would be expanded, the Downtown Dallas Historic District would be expanded, and the Harwood Historic District and the Continental Gin Company, they would be expanded and incorporated into bigger districts. And then in terms of a new historic district, we are recommending a potential Deep Ellum Historic District, eligible for both the National Register and local district listing, and the National Register nomination actually is already underway for Deep Ellum, funded by Preservation Dallas. Okay, here are the district boundaries. You can see we're recommending kind of this downtown Dallas piece, instead of being all these little different things, become one kind of bigger thing. Same for the West End district. And then this district boundary for Deep Ellum it's currently being tweaked with the Texas Historical Commission. It will, there will be some things cut out, but this is the rough district boundary that we're working, the starting point for our working together with the Texas Historical Commission. Okay, future planning and management. What are we going to do with this data? So the data will help the OHP staff research demolition permits. It will help the OHP staff tailor their education and outreach. It will help property owners to evaluate whether to rehabilitate or redevelop. So if they're looking at what their incentives might be, they'll have that information about incentive eligibility. It'll help property owners decide whether they want to seek designation. It'll help real estate agents and buyers target properties that fit their plans. So, it's faster and smoother for everyone if someone who wants to redevelop just chooses a lot that doesn't have an eligible building on it. And help city OHP staff evaluate landmark and historic district applications. Another component of this project was merging everything into what we're calling the Dallas Open History Hub. It's a GIS-based tool that can be used to, it has all of the old survey data. So HHM did a number of surveys in the 90s, and there have been a number of other historic districts done, all integrated into one GIS application where you can click on the dot and see a photo and get basic survey information. That's also a flexible database that will allow the city staff to update the data in a continuing way. If they get a demolition permit, to note that. If they get an alteration permit, or also if there's a wonderful rehab done, to update that piece of data, and then to layer new surveys in one place. So it's really a one-stop shop. It's all done in GIS, so it is compatible with all of the other city GIS functions, and it's intended for ongoing data management. Okay, any questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Payne. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Young.
Yes, other than the Deep Ellum Historic District proposal, are there any other instances where the city is going to proactively seek local designation for some of these properties that don't have it?
I think that will be a strategic conversation within the city based on the findings. To date, that process has not been started, but okay. We shall see.
So, as of this point, that's the only one?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll defer to whoever wants to field this. Just a couple of general questions. First, thank you for this. I think this has been a long time in the making, from the 2014 demolitions and the recommendations, and having the survey updated is going to be a tremendous tool for our city. Could you let us know, globally, as Commissioner Young asked, recommendations on other historic districts, how is the survey intended to be utilized within the city going forward?
So there are a number of different pieces. One, I'll answer the question just for the survey and then the historic context. So in terms of the survey, one, it can be, now, and please also understand, these are all, the survey project itself, the current contract, is intended for informational purposes only. All these future steps will require public input, public hearings, public conversations. So these are potential future steps, but not things that I don't want property owners to get scared that they're underway without informing them. These would all require public input and property owner buy-in, and really property owner conversations before they happen. So, for example, the National Register nomination for Deep Ellum that's underway, that took many meetings with the Deep Ellum Foundation and Preservation Dallas to get everyone on board before that got started. So there can be other recommended local districts too. So there are a number of districts that are just local or just National Register. And like I said, that doesn't give them the full array of tax credits that they're eligible for. So, if the property owners opt to, they can pursue the additional layers of designation and therefore incentives. There also, I predict, likely will be a number of property owners who kind of fell, either their buildings were non-contributing in a National Register district before, or they just fell through the cracks in terms of the boundaries of old National Register districts, that will see the survey recommendation and realize that they are now eligible for state and federal tax credits. And I expect that through that process, the part 1/A process of the tax credit application, they'll argue that they're now contributing, and that will lead to an amendment to the nomination at the tail end of the process. And then the findings also could be incorporated into the demolition delay, but again, that is a separate political process that would require political will and impetus from the city if you choose to move forward with that.
So thank you so follow-up, I think you mentioned that there was a recommendation to consolidate some of the downtown historic districts, yes, some of which are only National Register with no local designations. And so again, this would be an opportunity to use this additional information, new structures that are likely eligible for historic designation to consider local designation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the survey is a snapshot in time, but right now it is in a good position for them to move forward with very little investment and work from the applicant, if they choose to do that quickly.
So thank you. So then one other question, I think one of the other recommendations, and I think I understand that this is supposed to be sort of the next step in updating the city's preservation plan. Could you speak to how this fits into that process? And that may be a question for Mr. Miller.
That I would say that the preservation plan, the survey presents a number of recommendations, but it does not present priorities, and it has not sought the level of public feedback that would be needed to attach a timeline and a prioritization to the recommendations. But there will need to be other conversations about bigger picture issues, policy issues too, in the preservation plan. I can let Mr. Miller speak to those.
Sure. Thank you for the question. It's Murray Miller. In addition to the survey providing opportunities for property owners to have access to incentives, we need the surveys as part of our day-to-day work in terms of understanding what is contributing and what is non-contributing. In relation to future planning, the surveys will be helpful in terms of establishing a base layer for direction, establishing preservation priorities, and yes, they can be used to assist in future planning, which may include not only a preservation plan, but also existing regulations such as the demolition delay ordinance. So those things would be very helpful in that regard as well.
So thank you. And just two more questions, and these I'm going to apologize are pretty highly technical, but just wanted to make sure that I understood. It was fascinating to go through the survey and the report, but there were a couple of items that I noted, and I think some of these are, you asked two people, you'll get three answers on architectural designations and style designations, but could you speak to how those were defined and how you developed the designations on buildings within the report?
Yes, so we use National Register Bulletin 16A. And the structure of that groups different styles into different time frames. And it also is somewhat high level. It doesn't have every style, but really the reason that we do that is we think of it as a way to facilitate query and grouping of properties. So, and there, like I said, not everyone groups style by time period, like the National Register Bulletin does, but that's what we follow. And again, also, there is the Dallas Open History Hub. So if we want to layer on different stylistic words or any sort of new tag or new keywords to help the data be useful, it's open. It's open and can be manipulated in an ongoing way. So this survey is a snapshot in time. But if there's a style, if you want to layer on a style for a property, just to be consistent with older documentation, the Dallas Open History Hub is flexible, and city staff can edit it to make sure that happens.
And that was really what I wanted to make sure is, a property does pursue designation. Their research shows that it was considered, international style. It's included within the survey, differently, that would not preclude if there is additional information that comes forward in future efforts. One doesn't cancel out the other, if you will. Is that correct?
That's correct. One does not cancel out the other. I mean, I think that if they're pursuing National Register designation, ours is probably a little bit more what they would want to use. But, locally, for example, international style is really considered like the early European modernism in the National Register category, whereas New Formalism moves into the 60s, the mid to late 20th century in that structure. So again, it depends on the designation that they're using, and certainly they can layer on things, and buildings have more than one style, and usually those applications have room to write pages and pages about the architectural style, where we have one or two selections from the drop-down menu. So there's plenty of opportunity to add more information.
Thank you. And I think this one is a follow-up to that is, you've got a number of great images that are included in the report. Some of them likely were done early in the process. I know we've had some buildings that have already been changed from what we're seeing, on the ground today versus what's in the report. So again, if there was either a future effort by the city, or if there was a future designation pursued by a property owner, it would be the historic documentation that would control for the properties. Is that correct? This is, as you said, a snapshot in time, but doesn't preclude other documentation.
Correct, and that this is a snapshot in time, and that's the whole point of having the Open History Hub, so that there is a kind of one-place shopping for updating the data. But usually, pursuing designation, at least the OHP staff can make their determinations on the date of the photography. But for National Register, usually 5 years is acceptable, provided that it's not been demolished or significantly altered in that time. So yes, change never stops. Every 5 minutes you can survey one day and turn around the next, and there will be change. But we do have a snapshot, and we also have a tool, the Open History Hub, to use for those continuing updates.
And I'm not sure who on staff may want to take this question, but as we move forward and are considering a request on buildings that are now part of this survey, will this be included in information that comes to Plan Commission? And I can think of a particular example where we have a video board that has been approved on a structure that's now included in the historic survey. Is that type of information something that will be available to this commission as we consider future requests?
It's Murray Miller. Certainly any application for designation that's administered through the Office of Historic Preservation will go through the CPC.
And thank you. I think mine was more general. If we have a structure that isn't designated but is included in the historic structures report, if there was going to be a modification that would potentially be detrimental to the structure and its historic integrity, will we just have that information as we're evaluating future requests?
Thank you for the follow-up question. It depends on whether it is something that we would regulate, because if it's not designated, but if it's within, let's say, a district as a non-contributor, the city code would certainly limit the number of items that the CPC would see, because their decision is made at the Landmark Commission level. Only if there was a recommendation from the Landmark Commission to City Council would the CPC see it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I may follow up on that just to understand how we might be able to utilize this as a tool throughout our city, but excited to see this moving forward. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, did you have something to add? I didn't mean to speak.
No
over you.
worries. I just wanted to say that the report, if the council or commissioners opt to use it, it's available. It's fully available. It's online for download, and the Open History Hub is there for you to use as a research tool in your own. Not that it would be part of the regulated process of what comes from Landmarks Commission to planning, but it's there for anyone in the public or in the city to use as a tool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions, commissioners?
Question, Mr. Chair.
Please, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my concerns, well, I guess my questions are based in your investigative approach and how you began to look at what is historic and creating historic districts versus the buildings and those things. So in my limited knowledge, a lot of our communities citywide have or have the intent to reflect some of the historic things that have happened in the communities or not necessarily in the buildings. How do we begin to investigate historic landmarks and areas that historically in our communities we did not have the historic structures? So how might we reflect on the historic nature of some of the areas, places, landscaping, and things that happened in some of our underrepresented communities and have them reflected to create a historic district that possibly respects some of the history that happened in those areas?
So first of all, I will say that the standards, the National Register standards and kind of accepted evaluation methods used by cities have really broadened and changed in a way that historic structures that would not have been considered eligible 20 years ago are considered eligible, and that when there are, when there is a structural cause for a lack of integrity, that does not deflect from the district's eligibility. For example, there's in Austin, there's a stadium associated with the Black High School. The Black High School is now gone. The stadium was built with the same plan as the White Stadium, but with inferior building materials and didn't get the same maintenance. And, they made the argument that you can't criticize its lack of integrity because that was by design, and it has been officially accepted by the National Register. So within the current structures of evaluating historic districts, there has been a lot of progress made in using those current tools to recognize and incentivize preservation and not the just kind of high style, high architecture buildings. In addition to that, there are a number of different communities that have begun conversations about incentive programs and local ordinances that recognize intangible heritage. And if there's a preservation plan, I would think that that would be kind of one subset of the plan would be intangible heritage ordinances. And there are things like, legacy building incentives, layering on collection of oral histories, preservation of documents and ephemera and making those more accessible, things like that. And we can have a conversation about that. Hopefully there will be a preservation planning process, and there will be a number of public forums and facilitated sessions to really look at what other cities have done in terms of intangible heritage and what some possible ordinances the city of Dallas could work through. But, in the meantime, that requires a new law. In the meantime, there really is a lot of possibility within your current ordinances and current structures. And I really hope that the city will proactively move forward with future phases of survey so that we can really make those recommendations. And I think that there will be a lot of surprise in how much things have changed and what is eligible now that probably wouldn't have been recommended eligible in the past.
I appreciate that answer, and that does cover the questions that I had. I'm thinking in terms of some of the events that happened in the communities that might not be relative to a building structure. For instance, we have an area called Bonton here in Dallas where there were actually bombs dropped from airplanes in that community, and there aren't buildings associated with it. It's area based, but that's an important part of history. So I just wanted to bring that to light in order to make sure that in our snapshot in time and the history hub and vocal history that comes across, that we're able to at least address some of those things so that we can have a historic nature of our communities.
Right. So absolutely. So battlefields and sites and even places, for example, places of parade or of significant protest. Those things, there don't have to be buildings there. Just the site can be listed as a landmark or listed in the National Register. But also, there is no reason that the things cannot be. The city maintains the Open History Hub. So what goes on there, the city can internally set their own criteria for. It doesn't necessarily have to be eligible as a land. I mean, there are non-contributing things on there now. So it's a very flexible format for you guys to choose how you want to represent the data and what data you want to add. But again, like I think that Bombtown could be listed on the National Register. There is that space for that within the current structure.
Thank you. I appreciate those answers, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stannard.
Yes, just a quick question, Ms. Payne. If you have a landmark designation as opposed to a building, historic building, how is that protected in any way, or is it?
Okay, so I assume you mean landmark. So there are several different tiers. There's a local landmark designation, there's a National Register designation, and then there's just a building that is historic, whatever way you want to define historic, just an old building that people love. So the National Register designation is an honorific designation. It provides a 20% federal tax credit and a 25% state tax credit for significant rehabilitation of a income producing building. It is not, can't be used for a private home. But it does not regulate, the federal government has no jurisdiction over land use law. It is administered by the Texas Historical Commission and the National Park Service. They do not have any zoning or permitting jurisdiction. It does not stop a building from being demolished. You can designate a building once on the National Register one day and tear it down the next day. If you get a tax credit, you commit to not demolishing the building for a period of 5 years, but after that, it can still be demolished. And actually, you can still, you can demolish it, you just have to give back the tax credit before that 5 years. Okay. Local landmark designation is zoning. It is a tool that is used by local municipalities who have land use power. It can be used to deny a demolition permit or to require a certificate of appropriateness for alterations, for exterior alterations. So only local designation has land use power that can be related to the permitting process.
Thank you. That's a great explanation. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, if I can just ask one follow-up to Commissioner Anderson's question. Is it correct that the criteria for eligibility for local designations includes history, heritage, and culture, historic event, significant persons, as well as historic education that can represent an era of architectural, social, or economic history, allowing for an understanding of how a place or area was used by past generations?
Thank you for the follow-up question. Yeah, there are a total of, I believe, 10 or 11 criteria which are intended to be more inclusive than perhaps the standard criteria that focuses on important people, places, and events. So yes, it is a lot more inclusive.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you. I had a quick follow-up question to Commissioner Stannard's question about what is regulated exactly, especially as it regards the Deep Ellum group of properties, because I'm aware of a lot of structural changes that have been made over the last few years by developers, and my understanding was that to some degree there was an intentional decision to not make that a historic district to allow some of the structural changes that businesses or tenants or property owners wanted to make to those buildings. Can you talk more about that relationship?
I'm sure that there are many conversations in the past that I do not know about. And in terms of what actually happens, you know, there was a lot of property owner involvement making the decision to move forward, but you know, there may be dissent at the end. How the National Register process works, though, is it moves forward. There has to be over 50% owner objection. If you're in support, if you don't respond, it's considered support for the National Register process. And you know what will come out at the end of that process is to be determined. But again, as I said, there is no land use regulation attached to National Register, so it's only incentive based. So if someone wants to build a roof deck or you know add bigger windows, but they don't want a tax credit, they can do whatever they want. If they want to get the tax credit, then they'll need to do an appropriate historic rehabilitation. So it will be incentive-based only. And I think the conversations that have happened to date, you know, indicate that provided that building owners can do what they want, they're okay with the designation. Whether there would be a political will for a local district that would have that binding review is a different conversation and one that has not been started yet, to my knowledge.
Okay, so this assessment and recommendation for official status is primarily related to National Historic Registry, not a local landmark designation.
I think Deep Ellum meets the criteria for a local historic district. Even with the changes that have happened so far, there is enough left that one can draw a boundary, you know, clipping out the really big new things that would meet the criteria for local designation. Now, meeting the criteria and having the owner support are two different things. So the survey report recommends that there is a district that meets both local and National Register criteria. Moving forward with an actual designation application is a very different thing.
Got it. Okay, so they would have to also apply for local landmark designation, in which case then land use and alterations would be, I guess, regulated by a local body that could deny permits if it was deemed inappropriate. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Stannard?
Yes, I have a quick aside, and Ms. Payne, and I don't know if it's for Ms. Payne or Mr. Miller. I noticed in your comments you mentioned the term legacy building, and we have had debates here about what constitutes a legacy building. Do you have a definition of what the city of Dallas considers a legacy building?
I'll answer that, and I think I probably used the term legacy data, and we use that in terms of talking about old surveys. So it's not, I don't think, I would discourage, I generally try to discourage entities from kind of inventing new terms, try to use the best practice terms. And in terms of a legacy building, or you can use legacy business, that's used sometimes. And there's no real definition. There's no real broadly accepted best practice in terms of that definition. But I was referring to legacy data, and I just mean that as survey data points that are not part of our current contract. So sorry for any confusion.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Payne and Mr. Miller, for the excellent briefing and the important work that you're doing. Commissioners, we're going to keep going. We're going to move the Elm Thicket briefing till the end, and we'll move on to the rest of the docket, beginning with the miscellaneous items D 212014. Ms. Carrasco, good morning. It should be coming up. Not yet, no. Thank you very much. Questions, commissioners? No questions. Next item, please.
Sorry, but could anyone online hear that presentation?
No,
We did not.
Was the voice faint or no sound at all?
no sound.
You may have to just really speak up and, try to maybe get really close to the microphone just to test it. Commissioner Popkin, could you hear that?
No, it doesn't appear the microphone's on. No, we're not hearing anything.
Okay, please stand by. Commissioner Popkin, they're speaking into the mic. If you can hear anything, just let us know, but I'm assuming you can't hear anything.
No, I heard none of that. No, still nothing. Not a sound.
Ms. Carrasco, I think maybe you can just come around the horseshoe and just take one of our mics.
Can you hear this mic?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for letting us know. Ms. Carrasco, if you don't mind, let's just go ahead and rebrief that item, the first item.
Can y'all hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm just waiting for the PowerPoint to come up.
It looks like it's up.
Okay, so the first case, D212-014, which is a request for a development plan and landscape plan for an office use on property zoned sub-area A within Plan Development District 741. The size of the request, approximately 6 acres. This is phase 4 of the Cypress Waters development on Olympus Boulevard and Watermill Road. It includes a standalone office building at 5 stories and approximately 255,000 square feet of floor area. They are also submitting a landscape plan. Let me see. Oh, the first phase of this development was approved in October of 2021. Okay, the general location of PD 741. Next slide. An aerial map with the area request outlined in red. Next map. Zoning map. Next slide. The proposed development plan. The areas in gray are not part of this development plan. The proposed office building is in white on the north side. Next slide. Proposed landscape plan. Next slide. The conceptual plan to the PD. Next slide. And staff is recommending approval. I can hold for questions.
Questions, Commissioners? No questions. Next item. Thank you.
Okay, the next case is D212-015, and we're just waiting for the PowerPoint. Okay, so D212-015 is an application for a development plan and landscape plan for an office use on property zone sub-area A within PD 741. And this is a sister case to the previous one. Next slide. Okay, so this site is approximately 8 acres, also on Olympus Boulevard. And it will include a 255,000 square foot total building area office building, 5 stories, similar to the previous case. There will be a standalone parking garage structure at 3 stories with 1,179 parking spaces. 168 on-site surface parking spaces will be included, along with 24 bicycle parking spaces. Landscaped plaza amenity area included, and they are submitting a landscape plan as well. This is also a part of the Cypress Waters development plan that was approved in October 2021. Next slide. General location of PD 741 with the yellow star. Next slide. An aerial map of the proposed development plan outlined in red. Next slide. Zoning map. Next slide. The proposed development plan reflecting the standalone garage and office building. Next slide. Proposed landscape plan. Next slide. Conceptual plan for the PD. Next slide. And staff is recommending approval.
Questions on this item, commissioners? Commissioner Stannard, please.
I just have, I forgot you're there. I started looking there. Sorry about that. One quick question, and I know this is a development plan, but I was just curious. In the parking garage, are there any charging stations of any kind that have been provided for?
The applicant did not provide that information, but I can get that answer for you. You're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you both. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Carrasco. Ms. Seaton, good morning. Commissioner Popkin, did you hear? I could hear you. No. Oh, I see. You got it on? Okay. Ms. Seaton, we're ready for you.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Thank you for your patience. This is M212015. It's a minor amendment for an existing site plan for specific use permit 954 for a private school on the property zoned R7.5A single family district. It's approximately 11.17 acres. This is on the northwest corner of Military Parkway and Buckner Boulevard. This is in District 7. This is prior action from the meeting on May 19th. This to allow the modification of a Phase 3 development for the parking plan and revisions for the building footprint. The proposal is to add the building slightly from the approved plan on the SUP. The dumpster and parking will be relocated, as I'll show you later, and the proposed plan exceeds the minimum landscape. The parking already is exceeded. So for the school and the church, the landscaping plan will not change, and a TMP has been submitted. This is the general location from downtown. It's on the east side. This is the aerial map and the zoning map. And this is the proposed site plan. And the next slide has the detail. So this is the area that they are looking at. So the building is going to be, say not enlarged, but moved over, and therefore some parking will be eliminated, but they are going to allocate that parking to the back area, and the dumpsters that are currently in that location where the building is will be moved to the parking area that's in the back side. This is the existing site plan, and staff is recommending approval.
Thank you very much. Questions, commissioners? Any questions on this item?
Good question.
Please, Commissioner Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you know if there are any problems with queuing at this site, since they are kind of working through parking and egress access? Do you know if there are any queuing problems on the existing thoroughfare?
They did submit their TMP, and it was approved by engineering, so you'll need to address that with them.
Well, just visually, do cars back up on the feeder?
According to their plan, when I reviewed it, it did look like they had the allocated designated area that can't think of the word, for allowing people to stop and wait for their children.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Any other questions on this item? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Eaton.
Thank you.
Commissioners, let's keep going. The signed cases will all be held under advisement to the next date. Okay, our next hearing on the 16th. And, all of them are being held to the 16th. That takes us to our zoning consent agenda. Commissioners, they have been taken off consent. We'll begin with case number 1, and Mr. Aguilera. Good morning, sir.
Can you hear me? Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the City Plan Commission. Oscar Aguilera with the current planning. Give me a second so I can get the presentation up and roll. Can everyone see the presentation? Application C201-314 is an application for the renewal of a specific use permit number 2167 for a build-bond office on a property zone plan development district number 784, the Trinity River Corridor Special Purpose District. It is within near the Trinity River, near downtown, to the south for the city in relation to city limits. And here is an aerial that gives you a better perspective of the location. So just to make a statement, the area is the complete black, which it also includes this portion here as shown by a site plan with the approval of a licensed surveyor and a stamp by his seal. As you can see, this is the property with the boundaries. My apologies for this. Just to make that correction, the surrounding uses are similar. There's other build-bond office. I presented this particular one a few weeks ago. There's an antenna tower. There's some sheet metal contractor, liquor store, another build-bond. Across the street, there's also another build-bond office. So currently it's developed again with build-bonds. It has been there for multitude of years. The applicant is seeking approval, and then according to the PD for 784, it requires a specific use permit for build-bonds. Office uses more than 500 feet away from a detention facility when located with downtown from district. The request is located at approximately 1,000 feet from the detention facility. Here is the site photos of the property. I tried to embark the entire location, so I kind of broke it in steps. So here's the convenience store. Here is the garbage can. Then I move towards the north, west, to try to make a capture of the whole site and give you a better perspective. This is the building for the build-bonds, and here's a different perspective, looking towards the detention center facility. And here are the surrounding uses. That's across the street. There's another build-bond law office. Here is the build-bond facility that you saw a couple of weeks ago. Here is another build-bond, just with a different name. And there's another build-bond. So, and here's the county facility for detention. And there's across the street another law office with another liquor store. So staff, I'll just go real quick. The proposed conditions will be the same as the previous approval. Here is the existing site plan. And then staff is recommending approval for a 3-year period with eligibility for automatic renewals for an additional 3-year period subject to a site plan and conditions. Does the commission have any questions?
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Young, please.
Yes, is the reason this is not being processed as an auto renewal that the applicant missed the auto renewal deadline?
Yes, that and staff had a relation to that because we had some questions about the site plan, so that kind of delayed the process, and then it missed the window for the automatic renewals.
Okay, and that leads to my second question. This was filed on August 2nd, which is what, 10 months ago?
Yes, sir.
Why the long time in getting here?
We had the issue with the site plan, then a couple of planners left. Then I took over the application. Then I had some questions about it, and then I looked at the site plan, and it's a survey sealed or with the seal of a licensed surveyor with the state of Texas, and the applicant states that they will comply with the site plan. So then I went ahead and scheduled it for the hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Stannard.
Yes, Mr. Aguilera, just for clarity's sake, for the record, your presentation states that, in fact, they did apply on time and that this was not because they were delinquent and it should be considered a renewal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
As I understand the answer, they applied before the expiration, but after the time for auto renewal application.
That is correct.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, let's keep going. Commissioners, case number 2Z201333 is going to be held under advisement to June 16th. We will brief it then. Takes us to case number 3 that has a staff recommendation of to be held under advisement to July 21st. So we'll brief that then. July 21st. And takes us to case number 4. Mr. Pepe, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for your patience. All right, this is Z212180. It's an application to amend and renew specific use permit 1374 for a private school and an open enrollment charter school limited to grades pre-K through 6th grade, which includes before and after school care, and to add a child care facility for infants to pre-K on property zoned tracts 1 and 2 within Conservation District number 6, Hollywood, Santa Monica, at the east corner of Lindsley Avenue and Tennyson Memorial Road. Area request is 2.816 acres. It's the location near Lindsley Park. It's the aerial imagery. It depicts the school as it's built out and how it's proposed under the SUP. And you can see Lindsley Park adjacent. So that is what's to the north. To the east, there's single family. There's multifamily to the southeast. There's more single family to the southwest and to the west. So the area request is currently developed as an open enrollment charter school for pre-K through 6th grade. It's the Lumen Lindsley Park School, and it includes before and after school care currently. The applicant is proposing to add daycare use for infants through pre-K to the existing school operations and building. No increase to the existing 12 classrooms. The proposed use is permitted in the district only with an SUP, as is the existing private school and open enrollment charter school use. And the traffic management plan is proposing a queue with an entrance and exit on Lindsley Drive. That's no change to the current operation, and the applicant does not propose substantive changes to the site and landscape plan. And the new plan before you today is only proposed in order to add language regarding the childcare use to the parking table. So here is that existing site plan as it is built out today. And this is the proposed site plan. And so again, it only modifies the table to include the childcare use. But generally, the school is located along Lindsay. There's a circular drive on Lindsley and school buildings behind the existing tract. And there's playground and open space to the south of the property and to the northeast of the property. So here's the site. And the north side on Lindsley near the drop-off area. That's the drop-off area entrance. And closer to the exit where the playground exists at this time. Further down Lindsley, play area, the parking lot that is in the northeastmost part of the site. A little more of that parking area. Then this is back on Tennyson looking east at the school grounds. More of that on the east along Tennyson. And then these are our surrounding uses across Tennyson, single family for the most part. Looking up Tennyson, it's the intersection of Tennyson and Lindsley. And that is looking down Lindsley into the single family neighborhood, the intersection of Lindsley and Tennyson, and more of that where you approach the park. And this is generally the adjacent to the north, all of the park use along Lindsley. So here are the proposed conditions, most of them being standard. They are adding in the childcare use and modifying the renewal period to 5 years and 5 years for auto renewal. Landscaping as shown on the site landscape plan as well as Article 10. They're not modifying the number of classrooms or parking or height. At our suggestion, they eliminated enrollment condition we try not to limit or regulate the enrollment on a public school use. So we had them strike that, as well as the loading requirement as stated in the plan. Hours of operation are remaining the same. The child care facility would mirror those of the school. Circular drive as shown on the plan, and the other requirements. Staff is the only staff alteration from the applicant request is the inclusion of one condition in regards to including the traffic study as a continual requirement, and this is suggested as a standard practice for schools. Most schools have these conditions that are approved new nowadays. This is an older school. It has been in operation 20-something years. Of course, we're at a renewal, but we are making edits to the conditions. So we have the ability to bring this up to what we would now suggest continually for a school use, and that is to have a traffic study every now and again to make sure the traffic management plan is still appropriate. Other than that, staff recommendation is approval for a 5-year period subject to a site and landscape plan, traffic management plan, and staff's recommended conditions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pepe. Questions, Commissioner Young?
Yes. First of all, I like on SUP renewals to look at the history of renewals and the time periods that were granted and so forth, and I didn't see that in the docket. Can you let us know when this SUP was first granted and what the renewal history was?
Yes, thank you. I have history on it going back to before 2000. I couldn't track down history further than that, but I believe that is when it was first approved. and then it continued to operate off of 5-year periods, 5-year auto renewals. They were up for auto renewal earlier. It might have been last year, but they were up for auto renewal for the eligibility. But as I understand it, because they were planning to make this child care addition, they let it pass the auto renewal deadline and into the regular zoning process.
My other question, if you go back to your traffic study slide, it says annual updates by June 1st of each even-numbered year. That's a little confusing. Should it be biannual?
Yes, I believe it should be biannual.
Thank you.
And that is closer to what they would prefer, as I understand it. But they didn't accept the full condition as it stands.
Okay, I just want the first half of the sentence to match the second half.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please, Commissioner Blair.
Yes, can you tell me if they have been consistently providing their TMP as required?
So the continual traffic studies have not been a condition of their approval until this point, because as I understand it, their original approval was before the time period in which we required them continually. But so as a result, there wouldn't be a continuous history of traffic studies because it was not a condition. We're suggesting, like most school approvals, bring this in with this condition so that we do have that history going forward.
So in their traffic management plan that's there today, are they suggesting queuing on the city streets?
Yes, so it includes a portion wherein they queue on Lindsley Avenue. So they have 12 on-site queue spots. They included 16 on-street spots in the TMP, wherein they found that they only typically use 8 of those on-street spots. But that is an area that is on Lindsley and has no parking signs. So that is how they have been operating, and it does include the TMP, or the TMP as submitted implies use of those on-street spots in the no parking area on Lindsley.
So you have a no parking area. They're queuing 8 cars per day on the no parking area. Is that a residential or a or a highly busy street?
I wouldn't say that. Lindsley Avenue, it doesn't front homes. In this portion, it fronts Lindsley Park. So there's not there's not an issue of access along that section where they'd be queuing, as well as Lindsley in this section only goes back sort of behind the school, but it by no means is an only way into the neighborhood that's behind it. So there is a residential area farther down Lindsley, but by no means is it the only way to access that. There's another access to Garland Road, to those homes to the south. So engineering do not have concerns about the traffic pattern in regards to that, because it's not a typically busy street aside from this peak demand.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item, commissioners? No questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pepe. Somehow only one item on this docket. No wonder you're so relaxed over there. Enjoy your 2-hour lunch. Commissioners, we will keep moving to case number 5, Z212213. Scroves.
Hi, good morning. This is Laura Groves Van Onia.
Good morning.
planner for the Office of Historic Preservation. I'm going to share my screen.
Commissioner Popkin, could you hear that? Okay, we're good. You may just have to speak up just a tad bit, please.
No problem. All right, again, good morning. This is item Z212-213. This All right, let's get started. So this request entails an application to amend the preservation criteria and exhibits for Historic Overlay District number 20, the Ambassador Hotel, located at 1312 South Hervé Street on property zone subdistrict number 2 within Planned Development District number 317, the Cedar Special Purpose District. The 1.278 acre site is located on the northwest corner of St. Paul Street and Hervé Street. Apologies, I seem to be having issue advancing the slides. Here we go. Okay, so this case precedes me, but I believe remains in recent memory for you all regarding the destruction of the Ambassador Hotel due to fire in 2019 and the recent consideration for removal of its historic overlay. Following a finding of denial without prejudice from the Landmark Commission and subsequently from the City Plan Commission, the applicant has worked with staff and the Designation Committee to amend the preservation criteria and exhibits for the historic overlay in order to be relevant for current conditions and potential redevelopment. These proposed amendments do not entail changes to the existing boundaries of the overlay. The subject overlay is located in the Cedars neighborhood, just south of downtown Dallas. This aerial map depicts the boundaries of the property fronting South Hervé Street prior to a fire in 2019. The zoning map indicates uses surrounding the subject overlay, including a park and museum, retail and office space, as well as a spa, brewery, event venue, and transitional housing. And this is background, I believe, was presented to you previously, but as a refresher, prior to its destruction, the Ambassador Hotel was the oldest remaining luxury hotel in Dallas. It was originally constructed in 1904 in the Sullivan-esque style. It was renovated in 1932 to reflect the local interest in Spanish colonial revival style architecture, which was popular at the time. The exterior scene on the lower left was maintained up until its loss. The Ambassador Hotel site was designated as a recorded Texas Historic Landmark in 1965, designated as a City of Dallas landmark in 1982, and listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 2019, just a few months prior to its destruction. The entire building was lost to a fire during the summer of 2019. And then also as a refresher, at the December 6, 2021 meeting of the Landmark Commission, an application for the removal of the historic overlay was denied without prejudice under application Z212-118 with the following findings of fact: that the original historic structure had significant historic and spatial relationship with Old City Park, now known as Dallas Heritage Village, the city's oldest public park, which should guide replacement construction. The original structure was of unique historic value in and of itself, which should guide replacement construction. The original construction had a significant spatial relationship with nearby historic buildings, which are among the few remaining historic structures in the Cedars neighborhood. The original structure served as a focal point, a pin marking an important place in the neighborhood development, which should guide replacement construction. And it is important for the safety of landmark structures in Dallas to avoid setting a precedent of relinquishing Landmark Commission oversight of replacement structures for destroyed landmark structures. So that was the finding of the Landmark Commission on December 6th. And at the March 10th, 2022 meeting of the City Plan Commission, an application for removal of the historic lay for the Ambassador Hotel was denied without prejudice at the request of the applicant. And then recently at the April 4th, 2022 meeting of the Landmark Commission, an application to amend the preservation criteria and exhibits for the Ambassador Hotel historic overlay was approved under application Z212-213 with a minor correction to section 5.1A Romanet 2. The proposed amendments have been updated to reflect the Landmark Commission's condition of approval. So this, the amendments were updated as posted and as you would have seen in your packet posted for this meeting. And I believe the following are some site photos that were previously presented to you, so I'm just going to quickly go through them as a refresher. And the following are some photos of the current uses surrounding the subject property to give you some context. So I'll quickly go through these as well. Okay, and the following are exhibits from the amended ordinance and preservation, what were the preservation criteria for this historic overlay. So the original preservation criteria for the Ambassador Hotel site have been updated and reframed as new preservation guidelines to guide the design for prospective redevelopment of the site. The purpose of this amendment to the H20 historic overlay is to allow for the redevelopment of the property in such a way that recognizes and celebrates the original building. However, the intent is not to replicate it. The proposed amendment entails replacement of the current preservation criteria with new preservation guidelines to serve in the design and redevelopment of the subject property, specifically with regard to building exterior, footprint, connection to Old City Park, and orientation to the Cedars neighborhood. This conceptual site plan presents an updated overlay map that depicts the original overlay boundary and the footprint of the original building to be retained, in addition to dedicated open space, orientation to South Irvay Street, and a 5-foot minimum setback to be maintained along the perimeter of the property. Staff recommendation is approval as amended, and I believe that applicant and or representative will be present for questions if needed during the public hearing. And I will do my best to answer any questions you may have at this point.
There are questions. Thank you, Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van Ona, for the briefing and update on kind of how we got to today. Would you confirm that there are 2 zoning districts on this site and that the historic overlay, I'm going to call it the southern part of the site, controls, but on the northern side, it will default to PD 317? Correct. So the hatched area is the overlay and the balance of the site is controlled by PD 317. Is that correct?
I believe it is, yes.
Thank you. And are you aware that the proposed conditions and a significant part of the consideration was this overlay was the connection of the site to Old City Park, now known as Dallas Heritage Village?
I am, yes.
And that was one of the original criteria that were included in Exhibit A. Could you speak to how that is being carried forward in the current conditions? And I guess I'll be a little bit more specific, is that with the removal of the original criteria, is it necessary to include the old item 7 regarding public improvements? Or was that anything that staff considered?
So as I briefly mentioned toward the beginning of this item, this case does precede me, and so this was developed by recent senior planner Liz Casso, who I believe you all saw the last time this item was being heard. But I'm going to do my best to.
And that's fine. And I will say I was able to work with Ms. Casso on this, and I can pose the question to the applicant as well. I think there was significant community consideration and landmark consideration regarding that historic connection. And I would just want to make sure that that is preserved because that's an ongoing community discussion point. So I'll ask the applicant to speak to that. And this may be a question for Mr. Navarez if he's available regarding the engineering review of the right-of-way, particularly any future plans for abandonment of St. Paul, and he's not with us today. So I'll pose those questions to the applicant because I think they've been in touch with Mr. Navarez as well. And final question for you, and again, this may be one if we could just have for our hearing today. As I understand, this project was initially pursuing tax credits before it was unfortunately lost to fire. There were drawings that were submitted to the city that documented the original structure, and I just wanted to understand how those documents might be preserved as a part of the city record.
Well, if they were submitted to the city, then they are considered public record, so we would have those on file.
Okay, so they would remain part of the record related to this site.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van Anna. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Young.
Yes, just a brief comment. If you look at the exhibits in the docket, the labeling does not match up with the exhibits in the preservation criteria, and I think there may even be a discrepancy between the preservation criteria and the ordinance. So I would just ask that before this moves forward to be heard by the City Council, that you make sure that all the exhibit labels are in order.
And if I may ask a follow-up, and I appreciate Commissioner Young reminding me of that, I believe there was a revised development plan, or not development plan, site exhibit that was circulated by the applicant. And again, we'll have the applicant speak to that at the hearing this afternoon and make sure that that was received by staff. Thank you, Ms. Van Anna.
Thank you all.
Any other questions on this item, commissioners? All right, let's keep moving. Let's take up one more case before we break for lunch. Case number 6. I see Mr. Mulkey's ready to go. Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. Can everyone see me and hear me and see my presentation? I think it's still loading. Come on. Okay, I'm going to start. I just hope everyone can hear me. First case I have for you today is Z201-306. The request is for a planned development district for R5A single-family district uses on property zoned in AA agricultural district, located on the north line of Grady Niblo Road, east of Spur 408, and it's 29.81 acres. This is the location map showing the property within city limits. As you can see, it's in the far southwest quadrant of the city. Here we see the aerial map with the property outlined in blue, as well as some surrounding uses. Here we see the zoning map with surrounding land uses, as well as surrounding zoning districts. To the north is undeveloped property, as well as a cell tower under SUP 2254. To the east is other undeveloped land, as well as another cell tower. To the south is single family zoned, a PD that's largely for R75A, as well as R1.5 acres. And then to the west is a church, private school under SUP 2236 and undeveloped property. The area request is currently zoned in AA district and it's undeveloped. The applicant proposes to develop the site with single family through a PD for R5A district uses. The permitted uses of this PD would default to those of an R5A district. However, the applicant does propose 3 lot types within the PD where the yard, lot, and space regulations will differ. The intent here with the applicant is to provide a variety of housing options within one development. So some site photos. This is on Grady Niblo Road looking north at the front of the property. Some more views on Grady Niblo of the front of that property. And this is off Grady Niblo Road on the property directly west, looking at the undeveloped property from that angle. This is off of Grady Niblo Road looking north at the church and private school immediately west of the request area. Some more views looking west towards the multifamily. This is the front of that multifamily development off of the access road. And then this is on Grady Niblo looking south at the Grady Niblo Estates subdivision, directly south of this request area. You can see an example of the homes within that neighborhood. And then this is further southeast of the area of request on Key Haven, looking south. This is a PD that allows for more of a rural residential product. This is the applicant's proposed development plan. The 3 different lot types are not called out specifically on this development plan. Rather, the conditions would allow for those 3 different lot types and they could be dispersed anywhere within the plan. Staff's recommendation is denial. However, staff has provided recommended conditions for CPC to consider if CPC moves to recommend approval of the request. These staff recommended conditions provide for alternate yard, lot, and space regulations for the 3 proposed lot types, as well as some design standards that we believe would potentially accomplish the goal of providing more diverse housing options within one development. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are questions for you. Commissioner Young, please.
Yes. Do you have, am I right, the applicant is seeking a total of 92 dwelling units?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
All right. Do you have a comparable number for your alternative staff recommendation?
No, because this is single family that would be developed with public streets and infrastructure and detention ponds and whatnot, it's really hard to get an accurate number of how many units would be within the development.
Do you have a sense of whether that number is larger or smaller than 92?
It would be smaller. We're recommending, for the most part, larger lot sizes than what the applicant is requesting.
Okay. Shifting gears entirely to the ingress and egress to this area from Grady Niblo at 408. Am I correct that entering the neighborhood from that location, you would travel southbound on Grady Niblo and then have to stop and yield to the high-speed traffic coming northbound off the exit ramp?
Let me share my aerial again. I'm having trouble visualizing that. Okay, so I'm sorry, where were you speaking to?
I'm talking about entering the neighborhood from 408.
Okay.
If I'm coming into the neighborhood from 408, I would come to the east side of the overpass, turn southbound, and then have to yield to the high-speed exit traffic coming northbound.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
All right, and coming out of the neighborhood, I would have to do the same, except that instead of having a view of the high-speed traffic coming toward me, I would have to look over my shoulder to see what high-speed traffic I was having to yield to.
That's correct. Are you talking about this point?
I'm talking about that point right there.
Okay.
And finally, if I were coming to the neighborhood from the south, I would have to come off the 408 exit ramp at however many miles an hour and slow down sufficiently to make a virtual U-turn onto Grady Niblo.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkie, I just wanted to follow up on staff's recommended conditions and Commissioner Young's question on the density. While the 3 sub-areas are recommended, I don't see anywhere that defines the percentage of those that would be recommended or how they would be allocated on the site. Could you speak to how you're seeing that as a net lower density than currently proposed?
Essentially, we're recommending that those sub-areas actually be sub-areas rather than lot types and be called out specifically on the development plan. I think in my case report, we sort of included a markup copy of the applicant's proposed development plan. Essentially, with staff's recommended conditions, we're envisioning that the lots along Grady Niblo Road be more or less sub-area A. So they're more of a townhome, closer to a townhome style development, that they face Grady Niblo and provide some good pedestrian amenities along that street frontage. More or less, again, this is kind of a generalization, but more or less we would envision that the sub-area B, closer to an R5A standard, would be in the center of the development. And then in the northeast corner towards where the detention pond and the escarpment is, that could be a sub-area C that's closer to an R75.
So is this page 6-20 of your case report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I don't think that I followed that was meant to be reflecting sub-areas, so thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, again, it's kind of general, but yeah.
Questions, commissioners? Any questions from our folks online? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mulkey. Commissioners, it is 11:55. Let's go ahead and take our lunch break and be back online at 12:40. 12:40.
This is just a quick test. I'm listening, so I heard it. Oop.
Check, check, check. Audio check. Just doing an audio check. Check, check, check.
Testing. Can you hear me on?
Can you hear me? Who's online? See, Jennifer, are you online? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
You want to speak, and then leave it here.
Thank you for coming. I wanted to tell you it's going to be a long day. We will. That's a lot. And we started at 9. I'm happy that we do hybrid because you don't need to take a day off to come up and listen to you. At least you can listen and everything. And then you can even sign up to speak and no call with us. Right. So I'm so happy that yeah, we do have some people for the virtual, and then lobby and the team that will be very I think that's it. That's why we have, I cannot stress how happy but I know it's not so many things for you, but I know. I will add an install just to be careful, just to be mindful of the people that will show up more. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Z201, 306.
Okay, Commissioners, we're ready to get back on the record. Commissioners, please take your seats. We're going to get started. Please let me know when we're recording. Are we recording? Oh. Thank you very much. We're back on the record. It is 12:45. Commissioners will continue with the docket, beginning with case Z201180. Mr. Mulkey, I think this case has already been briefed. Would you like to just go over some changes, please? Is it brief? I think it has.
Yes?
Yes, it was briefed. I can just go through a few updates real quick. So since the last meeting, the applicant has provided updated conditions that increase the minimum side and rear yard from 10 feet to 15 feet, which is just the standard side and rear yard in MF2. They've also revised their development plan to show buildings where a portion will be limited to 1 story only. And they've revised their 5% affordable units. It was originally 61 to 80, and now it's 81 to 100% AMFI. Oh, and I should note too, Staff's recommendation was previously approval subject to a development plan and staff's recommended conditions. It is now approval subject to a development plan and conditions. So there are no more disagreements between the applicant and staff on the conditions.
Questions, Commissioner Stannard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mulkey. I apologize that I didn't realize we'd started. I really apologize for that. A couple of questions. Have you been advised, were you aware that there's now been added to this project a playground, a pavilion where the community can gather, and a dog park? I doubt if it got into last Friday's development plan.
Yeah, I don't see it called out on the development plan.
Well, I guess we can bring that up later, because I was presented with a revised development plan because as I brought up when we looked at this before, I had requested that these items be added to make this a more self-contained community, which I think is important. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. It does look like the revised development plan that was circulated to the commission this week, dated May 26th. It does look like there has been a call for a dog park in the southeast corner.
And then where the Y is, do you see where they are going to put that? I'm calling it a pavilion because it's a roof with 4 columns where you don't get wet when you gather underneath it, but it's not enclosed, and they're going to have barbecues there.
Yeah, I see just north of the dog park, gathering area, barbecue grill, covered structure.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure of that. And I don't know if you know this, I understood that it can't be put on the development plan, but there is it your understanding there will be no parallel parking on any of the ingress areas and the driveways within the development?
On the development plan, they're not showing any areas with
Well,
parallel
they said
parking.
that the planners said that they couldn't show that, so I'm just curious if you had any discussions about that.
No, I don't recall that discussion.
Oh, okay. And I just want to know if there was any discussion about this. Was there discussion about how there's been a discussion about trash and garbage in the neighborhood. Did you have a discussion in this self-contained neighbor community how the garbage is going to be handled there?
All I can say is that there are areas called out on the development plan for trash bins, temporary staging areas, as well as enclosed dumpsters. We wouldn't really get into the specifics of trash collection with the PD.
Yeah, because I understood they're going to be valet pickup and then dumpsters for bulk areas. Okay, now, one last question. I am just going to ask you this as a general thing. Because I went out to the site and I noticed on Buckner Boulevard there were a lot of trees that sort of screened developments like this. And have there been any requests to make a screening buffer at North Buckner Boulevard of trees? I mean, more than what Title 10 requires or Chapter 10 requires?
Yeah, on the development plan, they're showing a 20-foot front landscape buffer that, if I recall correctly, will just meet Article 10 requirements for the street buffer zone. It will just be 20 feet, whereas usually I believe it's a depth or a width of 10 feet. So it would be enhanced. Okay,
I'll ask them later about that because I'm more interested in the density of it, you know, in being able to screen the multifamily part away from the street. So that would be my question there. Thanks so much, Mr. Mulkey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hampton, please.
Thank you. Mr. Mulkey, are you aware if there was consideration by the development team of a tree preservation plan or otherwise documenting the existing trees on site?
Yes, I see that was the other document that was circulated this week to the commission.
And Could you let me know the date of that? I'm not sure that I received it from staff.
Or
if you could simply resend it, that might be more beneficial.
Sure. Yeah, it looks like it was circulated by Ms. Hernandez yesterday, June 1st.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mulkey. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Stannard.
I have just one last question. We've discussed this before, but I want to be very clear on it. What is the width of the internal drives of this development? And when I say width, I want to clarify. I'm not talking about, because each one has that pull-in parking. So if you took that pull-out parking, how much area is left?
Yeah, that was previously a condition where staff and the applicant were not in agreement. They were specifying the width of the internal drive aisles within the conditions. In consulting with transportation, we would not support that because we'd rather just be silent on the PD or in the PD on that requirement, and then that issue could be addressed at permitting. So we just have to meet standard code requirements.
Okay, then let me follow up on that, and maybe, well, he's not here, but standard code requirements, because we do have requirements. Is this being treated as a shared access, or is it just a PD? I mean, what would be the standard code requirements?
It would not be treated as shared access. It would just be treated as internal drive aisles for a multifamily site. Off the top of my head, I can't really speak for transportation or for fire. I believe the minimum width would be 26 feet based on the height of the buildings. But again, we recommend that condition be silent in the PD.
I just always think when we're considering where these internal driveways are, and as long as that 26 does not include those parking spots, that it is very important in here that there is enough area.
No, that would be, I can say on that would be independent of the parking stalls.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Young.
Yes, Mr. Mulkey, Commissioner Carpenter and I were trading notes, and neither of us seem to have received any revised development plan submitted by the applicant since the docket came out. If you have a chance before the hearing to circulate that to the commissioners, that would be helpful.
Sure thing.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much for the update.
That has, just to say real quick, that has been an issue because we moved from the DallasCityHall.com domain name to @dallas.gov. We have had reports that, that's happened within the past week or two, that some of those emails from the @dallas.gov domain have been going to folks' spam or junk folders.
Okay, we will look there.
I will send it again, though, just in case.
Any other questions on this item? Commissioners, we'll get that forwarded. All right, next case, Mr. Mulkey.
Okay, next case I have is Z201-327. The request is for a planned development district for MF2A multifamily district uses on properties owned in NC Neighborhood Commercial Subdistrict within Planned Development District number 595, the South Dallas Fair Park Special Purpose District. It's located on the east line of Bear Street between Valentine Street and Silkwood Street, and it's approximately 0.55 acre. Here we see the location map of the location of the property within city limits. Here we see the aerial map with the area of request outlined in blue. the zoning map with surrounding districts and land uses. To the east is single family. To the south is a general merchandise use. Across Bear to the west in that sort of triangular block is a mix of general merchandise and single family uses. And then to the north on the other side of Valentine Street is undeveloped property. The site is currently undeveloped. The applicant proposes to develop the site with multifamily through a PD for MF2A district uses. They're also proposing modified development standards primarily related to setbacks, density, floor area, height, lot coverage, visual obstruction regulations, and design standards. So this is on Bear Street looking east at the front of the property. Some more views from Bear. This is on Silkwood Street on the southern edge of the property looking north. Also on Silkwood looking north. And this is on Valentine Street looking south at the northern edge of the property. And then surrounding uses, this is on Silkwood Street looking south to that general merchandise store. This is on Valentine looking south at some of the single family behind the area of request. Some more single family on Valentine Street. And this is the general merchandise west of the site. And these are the applicant's existing development standards as well as the standards that are proposed for this PD. Also included for comparison are standard MF2A requirements. So with this PD request, they're proposing no front setback, as well as no side setback and a rear setback of 2.5 feet, proposing an FAR of 1.25 with a max of 36 dwelling units, a max height of 45 feet or 3 stories, removing the residential proximity slope requirement, requiring a lot coverage of 45%, and then the typical uses allowed in a multifamily district would be retained. This is the applicant's proposed development plan. You can see the two parcels of the site separated by a 15-foot wide alley with those apartment buildings at the Bear frontage. And the applicant's proposed landscape plan showing some of those street trees along Bear Street. Since the publication of the docket, this was actually since the publication of the docket for the last meeting, staff has recommended some conditions that would codify the deviations requested by the applicant on their proposed landscape plan. So these aren't substantive changes to the conditions. They would just codify in writing what's being proposed on the landscape plan, just to lock it down a little bit more. The applicant has agreed to these updates. And these are those additional conditions for the street buffer zone, some soil and planting area requirements, as well as the RBZ, and a few other things. Staff's recommendation is approval, subject to a development plan, a landscape plan, and conditions, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Young.
First of all, a technical question. On page 811, we specify maximum floor area is 30,000 square feet. And on the next page, we specify a maximum FAR. Why both of those, and don't they, if not conflict, at least create confusion?
My personal thought is I don't understand why we regulate floor area in addition to FAR or lot coverage in addition to FAR. However, I have seen in many PDs and also in our code that's standard practice to have both of those regulations listed.
Well, lot coverage and FAR are different concepts.
Sure.
But if you say maximum floor area is 30,000 and maximum FAR is 1.25 and you multiply that by the number of square feet and you get a number greater than 30,000, we're sending conflicting signals.
Yeah, I believe the applicant's intent is to have the maximum floor area of 30,000.
Okay.
So if the FAR conflicts, that would need to be
All
revised.
Right. Now let's get a little more fundamental. If my tired eyes can calculate correctly, it looks like about 32 feet from the closest part of the building to the single-family property line. Is that about right?
Yes, that sounds about right.
Okay, and at that 32-foot distance, the single-family property owner could be looking out at a 45-foot tall building.
That's correct.
Does that not give you any concern?
The applicant is proposing a 100% affordable housing project here in an area where a lot of pedestrian improvements have already been made along Bear Street. We really felt that the way the project is designed, with the buildings being pushed up to the street to interact with that pedestrian realm, and providing reduced parking requirements for this affordable multifamily, we felt that justified the deviations that are being requested.
Well, all right, we can wonder if the single-family homeowner would share those sentiments, but as to the pushing up to the street, it's correct, is it not, that even in the form districts, there's typically not a 0-foot setback adjacent to the streets?
Yeah, I think there's a minimum of 5 feet and a maximum of 15 feet.
Okay, so we're pushing it up closer to the street even than we do in those districts. And we're dispensing with any street-adjacent landscaping, is that correct?
No, that's not correct. They are providing landscaping in the along the street frontage.
Well, and where is that given that? All right, I guess I see some space in some little pockets.
Yeah, if you look at page 819 of the case report, it's an enlarged version of the proposed landscape plan. They're showing street trees along that sidewalk, and that sidewalk already does have several improvements made to it as part of the Bear Street.
And those street trees will be in the public right-of-way, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all for now.
Question? Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, Mr. Mulkey. My question has to do with the number of concessions that this, that the conditions for this project, present when they're not linked to any sort of affordability language in the PD whatsoever. When we did the revision of the mixed income housing program recently, and they had to abide by residential proximity slope, and the parking reduction was 0.5 per unit, I believe, and there's very specific language in these PDs, linking these concessions to affordability. These concessions here are, far in excess of those considerations. We've got reduced setbacks here, front and back. We've got increased lot coverage. We've got increased height. We've got decreased visibility triangles, which is something we don't normally do in zoning cases. Elimination of residential proximity to slope, no site trees whatsoever, reduced standards for landscaping buffer between the project and the single family to the rear. The parking is, 0.3 something. I'm sorry, I can't read my notes. A reduction from the 0.5. So you have 36 units with 13 parking spaces. My question is, I guess, philosophical in that we have really gutted the livability of this project in pursuit of providing these affordable units, but the PD doesn't link any of this to providing affordability. In fact, I don't see anything that would constrain this from being a totally market rate development.
Yeah, so I'll pick out a few things from that. First of all, livability is a subjective concept. It's really hard to zone for livability. Second, regarding the possibility of language being included for mixed income housing, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a policy on what language to include if a project is proposed to be 100% affordable. At least I haven't received anything from housing on that, so that may be a question for housing. Unfortunately, Pam Thompson is unavailable today. The reduced parking ratio with the affordable units of 0.33 space per unit. I did consult with our transportation department on that. They looked at the ITE trip generation manual and determined that that is an appropriate parking ratio for affordable multifamily housing. I believe he said it can go as low as 0.25 space per unit. And then there was one other thing that slips my mind now.
Residential proximity slope, visibility triangles, setbacks, no site trees, landscape
visibility
buffers.
triangle. That was another deviation where I consulted with transportation, and they didn't have any issues with reducing that visibility triangle there.
I guess I'm looking for the logical consistency of requiring specific language in PDs for, providing certain concessions for specific mixed income housing, but I don't understand how we can justify making all these concessions and not tying it legally to the ordinance that is creating this district. I guess that's a question perhaps for legal.
Yeah, I mean, I think staff wouldn't have any objection to including language that ties the project to the mixed income housing section of code. It's just that we usually do that when we're specifying a minimum amount of affordable housing that needs to be met in order to receive development bonuses. For a project like this that's 100% affordable, I'm not sure what the right course of action is there.
Well, if the staff is justifying these concessions based on 100% affordability, I would think the proper language in the PD would specify 100% affordability, but.
Yeah, that may be a question for housing. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Thank you, Mr. Mulkey.
Thank you.
Commissioner Standard.
Yes, Mr. Mulkey. I just happened to be in this area 3 weeks ago, and I want to ask you a question. I'm assuming you've been possibly out there. Would you say that this was a highly distressed area? This particular
That's not a determination I'm qualified to make.
Well, I was thinking that we are tasked with having things ease into the neighborhood and taking each neighborhood and each situation on its own. And I was thinking that perhaps some of these, because it is 100% affordable, and some of these concessions were made based on, that getting this housing in this area was so important to get multifamily. Was that any part of your determination, that it was a good land use in this distressed area?
Again, I can't speak to whether or not this is a distressed area. As I was saying during Commissioner Young's questions, we did feel that this was a solid proposal based on the surrounding area and the improvements that have already been made along Bear Street. As far as, I can just say that, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I think the one kind of metric we can use to go off of is the market value analysis, or the MVA category for the area. In the immediate vicinity of this site, there's an E MVA cluster as well as an I MVA cluster. Our MVA categories run from A all the way through, I think I is the last one. So that more or less gives an indication of the surrounding area and if affordable housing is needed in this area.
Thank you.
Commissioner Van.
Yeah, I believe Commissioner spoke to this question around affordability, but just not seeing the direct, explicit language there. So she already answered that question.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on this item? Commissioner Kingston.
Thank you. Okay. Did legal look at this and approve it?
Yeah, all of our PDs are reviewed by legal.
Okay. Because I guess I share the same concern that some of the other commissioners have, that there's no creation of a special, we're just wholesaling, giving them all of this zoning without any requirement in the PD whatsoever that they provide even one affordable unit, let alone all of it. And then my other question is, do you have any concerns about concentrating 100% of affordable housing in this area, and how that comports with Dallas's legal obligations under its settlement agreement with HUD and the enforcement order?
So within this development, there are a total of 36 units. So no, I would not consider that a massive concentration of affordable housing. As to your other question, current planning staff can only go on the recommendation of our colleagues in other departments, such as engineering and housing. For this case, housing did not recommend any language be included in the PD of 100% affordable or a minimum percentage that's affordable within the PD. So again, that's really all we can go on. But like I said, staff has no objection to including language in the PD that would tie it to mixed income housing.
Ms. Thompson, I think you're available, and we thank you for that. We see you're in your car. Thank you for joining us.
Unlike our council members a little while ago, I'm not actually driving this time. So hopefully I can answer your questions.
Did you get the last question from Commissioner Kingston?
Yeah, so I would rather that the city attorney's office really weigh in on that, but from a housing staff perspective, new investment in this portion of the city is important to the housing department. The fact that the design of this project follows the vernacular of the homes that are just a little bit north on Bear Street. That is, they're up to the street, they're pedestrian oriented, there's sidewalks, it's not overparked. Those are important to housing as well. If the commission would like to trade affordability for additional design, we could support that. But my concern is that this matches the sort of the new construction design coming down Bear to have an emphasis on a walkable community more than an emphasis on a place that you drive to and from, regardless of the affordability.
Thank you for that. Any follow-ups, Commissioner Hampton?
And I'm not sure if this is for Ms. Thompson or Mr. Mulkey, but I believe you're referencing some of the townhouse projects that were built north on Bear Street. Are you aware if those were part of a, sorry, the name has just flown out of my head, an affordable housing initiative by the city of Dallas?
Yeah, that would be a question for Ms. Thompson.
And I think we may have lost her. Oh, I can perhaps give some context. I was, in fact, involved with the community housing organization on those projects many years ago, and I believe that may speak to some of the comments that you're hearing about the affordability component, because they were in fact required to be affordable. And I think that would be a consideration if we're using that for the model for new housing coming in. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions, Commissioner Kingston?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this question was answered, and I'm not sure that planning staff is the person to ask, but what is the racial makeup of the area that this project is proposed to be put in?
That is absolutely 100% not related to the scope of this review of this case. Our scope is zoning and land use only, and literally absolutely 100% nothing else.
Okay. Well, my concern is that we are putting 100% affordable housing into a predominantly a community of color in violation of federal fair housing. And I'd like to know if that analysis was done, and if so, by whom.
But it's a multifamily, it's a PD with a base of MF. It doesn't say it's affordable housing in the zoning. So it's a proposal for a multifamily product.
So the zoning doesn't have any requirement for any of it to be affordable?
No. Am I right?
That's...
Yeah,
I think I've heard it. Thank you.
Did you want to clarify, Mr. Mulkey?
Sure. Yeah, so the current conditions of the PD do not include any language that requires this project, with all the deviations requested, to comply with the mixed income housing section of our code. The mixed income housing program is an incentive program, so it's not required. It incentivizes the construction of affordable housing in exchange for certain development bonuses being granted. That's kind of all I wanted to clarify.
Please, Commissioner Kingston.
Thank you. But the incentive program is for development by right. This is a planned development district, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, we'll keep moving. Commissioners, case number 9 is going to be held under advisement. Don't have a date yet. We'll have that at the hearing. So that takes us back to the beginning of our docket and to the Elm Thicket briefing. I think we're ready for that. Yes. Mr. King, good afternoon, sir.
If you'll please allow me a few seconds, I'll get this plugged in and going. Good afternoon. I'm Mike King. I'm the senior planner. This is case number Z167395. Let me share my screen. There you go. Okay. This request is an authorized hearing on property zone CR, Community Retail District, CS, Commercial Service District, DA, Duplex District, IR, Industrial Research District, LO1, Limited Office District, MC1, Multiple Commercial District, MF2A, Multifamily District, PA, Parking District, R75A, Single Family District, R10A, Single Family District, TH2A, Townhouse District, TH3A, Townhouse District, and Plan Development Districts numbers 67, 326, 515, 659, 670, 771, 814, and 947. This authorized hearing area is approximately 521 acres. This gives you quite a general location of where it is in the city. Just think just east of Love Field. A better idea is area map right here, showing the individual lots and this neighborhood and its relation to Love Field. It is generally surrounded by Lovers to the north, Inwood to the east, Lemon and Bluffview to the west, and Mockingbird to the south. The zoning and land use in this neighborhood is a pretty resilient mix. I've got a on the north end or north and surrounding area surrounding the district, retail and personal services, Love Field Airport. In the district itself, there's some multifamily, and then the majority of it is single family residential. Some background on this case goes back to July of 2017, actually July 2016, and further with the Strategic Neighborhood Action Plan. Ms. Udrea, or Dr. Udrea, actually passed that out, so you can have that as a reference, and Yolanda has it for the notes for later. The residents in the neighborhood were engaged by Planning and Urban Design to develop a vision for their future and address the needs to aid in neighborhood They eventually came up with an action step in a plan to address the need for zoning change in order to aid in neighborhood stabilization. And that brings us to today. With September 7th, 2017, an authorized hearing was initiated by the City Plan Commission. October 12th of 2020, first community meeting was held virtually due to COVID. August 21st, the second community meeting was held virtually and in person. We had a limited amount of people at the KB Polk Recreation Center who didn't have internet access. In December 2020, a steering committee was appointed by Mayor Pro Tem Medrano. So after that steering committee was appointed from January 11th to 2021 to March of 2022, we had 13 steering committee meetings. In late January of 2022, we even did 3 days of on-site, in-person question and answer listening sessions where folks came out in the cold weather and asked questions and spoke with each other. So what we're dealing with in this area is a dramatic decrease in population of people of color. The history of this neighborhood up until 2014, almost 90% of this neighborhood was Black and Hispanic people of color. Prior to 2000, it was almost 90% what we call a Black neighborhood in Dallas. And it goes all the way back to the history of the neighborhood. The median real estate taxes have increased at least 33%. Median home prices have doubled in the last 12 years in at least 2 block groups within the hearing area. The percentage change in median value of an owner-occupied home between 2 recent periods demonstrates the need to address the displacement issues and the pressure of the legacy residents. As you can see, the picture on the left is 2005 to 2009. That had a 132% increase in median value, and from 2015 to 2019, it became a 230% increase. So it was very alarming to the legacy residents in the neighborhood. When we talk about community engagement, we talked about the steering committee meetings. There's 2,213 housing units in the authorized hearing area. The 13 steering committee meetings and the 2 noticed meetings, community meetings that we held, we had approximately 750 stakeholder attendees. We had 3 days of on-site, in-person question and answer sessions in January. We had about 180 stakeholders attend. And as of October of 2021, when I first was assigned this case and started trying to keep track of it, staff has responded to numerous emails and calls, 9 in-person meetings with stakeholders. We've interacted with at least 900 stakeholders and 3 neighborhood groups. The interested parties list that we send out reaches over 485 stakeholders in the community. So give you a quick tour of the neighborhood. So we're going to go from Lovers to Inwood. We have a mix of retail, community office, there's school, there's multifamily. Coming around the bank on the corner, a bunch of small shops, some professional offices on Inwood. Get some townhome development and multifamily development along Inwood as well. There's a neighborhood anchor grocery store. More townhouses. When we come around the south side on Mockingbird, this is a bank, but we have some retail services as well. And then coming back around the street, a lot of community retail uses, and then a slew of car dealerships as you go up Lemon. And then the last, we have a small multifamily rehab facility that's inside the authorized hearing area. So the steering committee, through their meetings, they came up with some proposed changes, primarily to affect Tract 3 of PD 67 and to create a new PD in the R75 district located south of University Boulevard. Staff went through and we looked at it starting in October, and we wanted to expand it a little bit. So we wanted to expand that new PD. We also wanted to address PD 67 as a whole, and that would affect tract 1, 2, 3, and 4, and leave tract 5 alone because it actually conforms to 51A. Steering committee proposed changes for tract 3 of PD 67 is duplex use permitted on property fronting Roper Street and Maple Avenue. 90% of the roof structures must be hip and gable when greater than 20 feet from grade. Maximum structure height is 20 feet rather than 30 in R75 districts. No portion of the structure can be greater than 30 feet from grade. Maximum lot coverage is 45% for single-story structures and 35% for multiple-story structures, and this is to address the encroachment on the smaller legacy homes and allow more light and air through the community. The staff proposed changes for tract 3, PD 67, are the same as the steering committee with one addition. We wanted to reduce the maximum lot coverage for non-residential structures to 20% instead of 25%. So just taking the amount of built space on the lots down. So same issues they have. So this is the red area is Maple and Roper Streets where they want to permit duplex use. Staff concurs with their changes and transportation and the other departments that we've talked to believes that the street can handle it. They're wide enough and there's not so much demand on it as a thoroughfare. The steering committee proposed changes for tract 3 PD 67 dealing with roof type options. Currently, roof types are not regulated in R75A. What's proposed is 90% of the roof of the main structure must be hip and gable when greater than 20 feet from grade. If the entire structure is greater than 20 feet from grade, 90% of the roof must be hip or gable. If the entire structure is less than 20 feet from grade, the roof doesn't have to be hip or gable, so it allows some of the more modern homes with flat or shed or eccentric types of roofs. We agree, staff agrees with this proposal as well. There are other proposed changes to reduce height from 30 feet to 25 feet. We concur with that. And then lot coverage, taking it from 45% for residential structures to 45% for single-story residential structures and 35% for multiple-story structures. We concur with that too. So, but one last thing we wanted to do with PD 67, taking a harder look at it, we wanted to clarify the code language. PD 67 was written in 1974, so it's as old as I am, and I need to fix a few things too. So, so we wanted to include tract 1 in the proposed conditions for tract 3. The belief is that tract 1 and tract 3 are virtually identical in the way they were in their development pattern and the housing types there. So we wanted to share the proposed conditions. Maximum lot coverage for non-residential structures is 20% for tracts 1 and 3. So just taking those accessory structures, non-residential structures down to 20%. And then last, we want to combine tracts 2 and 4. Tracts 2 and 4 are currently one piece of property. It's a multifamily apartment complex, and they have 2 zoning districts applying to one piece of property. It's very confusing to our plans examiners and our zoning staff. So we wanted to try to alleviate that burden by combining tracts 2 and 4. As a matter of fact, tract 4 is written in Chapter 51A code language. Tract 2 is not. So that further confuses our staff. So a little bit more on that. Let me see. So the steering committee proposed changes for a new plan development. This is the area that is south of University in the R75A district. They believe a planned development district is needed to address displacement pressure while maintaining potential opportunities for new development. 90% of the, so we've gone through these standards for PD 67. You'll notice they're very much the same. 90% of the roof must be hip and gable when more than 20 feet from grade. maximum structure height of 25 feet, maximum lot coverage 45% for single-story structures, 35 for multiple-story structures. Almost identical to PD 67 Track 3 proposals. The staff proposed changes is just to expand it a little bit, to take that new PD north of University everywhere except for Airway Heights. Airway Heights was a subdivision in this area that just recently, in zoning standards, just recently converted from multifamily to R75A. They fought very hard for that. I want to respect that. So we want to have the same conditions. We just want to do maximum lot coverage for non-residential structures of 20%. Let me get this. There, sorry about that. The steering committee proposed changes. Currently rooftop not regulated. Sounds redundant to Track 3, but PD 67, but wanted to go over it one more time. Staff wants to, we concur with the proposed changes. We like what they came up with in their 13 meetings. The maximum structure height going from 30 feet to 25 feet, we concur. Maximum lot coverage 45% overall, going to 35% for multiple story structures. We concur with that. So we really just have a few differing opinions with the steering committee on things, and it may just be that it was an oversight or just got lost. So with that, I wanted to entertain your questions, but also say that on June 16th, the City Plan Commission meeting, when y'all meet again, during the briefing, we're going to do a bus tour, so be ready to go out and be a tourist for the morning, and then the CPC hearing hopefully afterwards. With that, do I have any questions?
Oh, I'm sure you do. Thank you very much, Mr. King. Excellent briefing. Commissioner Young, I see you. Or please.
Okay. What is the steering committee recommendation and the staff recommendation for the area outside PD 67, which I think would be mostly or entirely the area between Roper and Inwood?
So the area between Roper and Inwood is R10. It's an R10 district. We don't have a recommendation for that. We had did you say Roper and Inwood? That's the new PD that's.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
You said the area between Roper and Inwood?
The area east of what you got labeled new PD.
Okay, just east of there, that's the R10 district that's along on one side of Oriole Street and one side of Inwood Road, and I want to say Boulevard, sorry.
Right, so your proposal is to leave that as is?
Yes.
Okay. Within the PD, I guess within the old Track 3 of the PD, well, actually all the tracks of the PD, is it proposed to retain the existing land use map that allows certain lots to be duplex?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
With the exception that Roper, and I believe you mentioned one other street,
Mabel,
would become duplex allowable per se?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Hampton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. King, for helping shepherd this case through. I know you've taken it up from other staff and appreciate your diligence in bringing this forward in consideration and sharing information with us today. Two questions, and this map, or perhaps the one prior to it. I think steering committee recommendations had a proposed new PD that extended to University. As staff has evaluated this, you've suggested expanding that north of University. Is that reflecting the I guess what the general understanding of the Elm Thicket neighborhood is, or could you speak to how staff arrived at that expanded PD area, what your considerations were?
Our considerations on that were that the land use pattern and the development pattern housing types that were in place were extremely similar to what we had south of University. So I wanted a idea that as it is, it's a neighborhood, and I didn't want to divide it along a north-south line.
Thank you. And I think I appreciated you sharing the video virtual bus tour. It was very helpful in understanding the context and some of the character of the area, and I'm sure we'll see that again next week. When you were looking at PD 67, you mentioned that that PD is combining some of the tracks that have similar development patterns, reflecting some of the development that's in place. Is it also reconciling conflicts? I think there's some Chapter 51 and Chapter 51A references, and it will bring the entire PD forward under 51A and reflecting the existing development pattern. Is that correct?
Yes, the staff proposal is to bring it all into 51A.
Okay. And I have a lot of questions, and I'm trying to be sensitive to time because I know we're going to be moving into our hearing here shortly. I guess two high-level questions. Thank you for sharing this neighborhood action plan with us. One of the considerations is this authorized hearing came out of those recommendations. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think we received some questions about during the steering committee process and through your community outreach on the difference between the authorized hearing and a neighborhood stabilization overlay. Was one of the reasons why the authorized hearing moved forward was because of the number of rezoning requests that were coming in the area?
I don't believe it was the rezoning request. I think it was more attempts to replat to make the 50 by 150 lots 100 by 150 lots.
And so that combined, and I know many on the commission here have been here when we've had some of the rezoning requests, so they can probably speak to it more than I can as well. But so between those, but those aren't things that could be considered in a neighborhood stabilization overlay. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and that was, I think, the bigger question. And you kind of were looking ahead for us to help us understand how this is moving forward. We're going to have a bus tour is scheduled for the 16th. You know, as this moves to Plan Commission, in your experience, and I don't know if this would be a question for Dr. Udrea, you know, would you think that there would be any consideration that this body would, you know, consider this in one hearing, or do you think we'll probably take a couple hearings to allow for our public input and for the commission to evaluate all this criterion information that's coming?
In my experience with this neighborhood, with this authorized hearing, it's going to take some time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hampton. I think we have time for a couple more questions before we have a hard stop. Commissioner Young, please.
Just a brief request. Could we get a copy of this PowerPoint circulated to the Commission before the next hearing?
Absolutely,
Yes.
sir.
Thank you.
And we do have a website, and I think Mike is going to put it on the website too.
Thank you for that. Any questions from our commissioners online? No questions. Thank you very much, Mr. King. Commissioners, just a quick reminder, as Mr. King stated, we do have a bus tour scheduled for the 16th, where we'll be touring the area. And with that, it is 1:40 p.m., and that concludes the briefing of the Dallas City Plan Commission, and we'll begin our hearing right now.